Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Dr. Thomishia Booker. Thomishia is the CEO and owner of Hey Carter Incorporated. She began first writing her first series in 2016 called Hey Carter, a children's book series. She's passionate about diversity and inclusion in children's entertainment, which I think is just such an awesome topic. Her book, Brown Boy Joy, has been featured in Essence, NBC, and Netflix family. So today we're going to be talking about children's books. So how do you write them? How do you publish them, market them, all that stuff? And she'll be sharing her experience. But also, I think just really bigger than that is the ability that kids' books have to just impact future generations and to teach tough topics in a compelling way as in formative years for kids. I mean, I think it's one of the most powerful things about kids' books in general. And I think it's awesome just about the topic that you're writing on. So Thomishia, great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, so let's go back to your first book. Why did you decide to write your first book and why kids' books?
So I never imagined that I would be a children's book author. This is something that I think I kind of fell into a little bit, but also know that when I reflect back, I have planted these seeds. I just didn't really know it. When I was pregnant with my first son, I turned to writing as a way to express myself. I was having difficulty just welcoming the thought of being a new mom and also just feeling that heaviness of bringing a Black son into the world. So that space that I was in at that time really led me to writing. You know, I wanted to create something for my son where he can see himself in it, and all little Black boys and Black children that look like him can also see themselves. So that's when I started to write my first book. And the first book I wrote is called My Brown Skin. And really it's a love letter to my inner child and hit on some things that I knew I really needed as a little girl growing up.
And so how did, because I would imagine, I think this is relatively common of like writing the book for your kid. And so it's like, it makes it so much easier because we always talk about the concept of an ideal reader. And when you have one specific person in mind, I feel like it helps you write a better book. How did that impact both the topic that you chose to write about, how you wrote the book, and ultimately the end result of what the book came to be?
Well, I think the process for me was just really healing, because initially it was, I wanted to write it for my son. It was for him. I had that ideal reader, but actually it was coming from a more internal place. It was speaking to my inner child. And I think that made the process just easier and made the intentionality behind the book come out really clearly. I wanted all children to just know that they are loved and cherished. And I wanted Black children specifically to know that there's so much beauty in who they are and the beauty of their skin. And that was definitely a message that I needed to hear. So at that time, I didn't exactly know that it was for me, or I don't think I was at a place where I could recognize that it was for me. I think it was easier to say like it was for my son. And I think, many parents can say when you have a child, it's really kind of holding a mirror up to yourself.
Yeah.
This was one of those moments for me. It wasn't up until recently that I was able to be like, oh yeah, like actually, I think that was more for me than for him. And I think now it's such a beautiful blend of a gift for both of us.
Yeah, that's cool. So you feel like at the time you didn't realize that it was almost therapeutic.
Absolutely.
Because you felt like you were writing for your son, but then after the fact you realize, hold up, this was really for me and for him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Do you think that made it easier or harder to write the book?
I definitely think that because I was so focused on my son, it made it easier because I just wanted it for him. It was started off as a passion project. I mean, now I'm like really deep into this book business and have just gone a whole different direction. But initially it was just this like feel good, trying to express my feelings, trying to give a gift for my child. And I was just kind of doing it from a place of that, coming from my heart. And so I think that made it a little bit easy. I definitely didn't sit down with this like time to heal these wounds. And, but it definitely came out of a place of pain for sure.
Yeah. And I love that kind of, I feel like a lot of people's experience mirrors that, which is, we always say it's kind of cheesy, but it's like a book is this key that opens the door to Narnia. It's like
Yeah.
this magical world that you didn't know existed, that only exists for published authors. But really, I think in more ways than that, it's, and this happened for me too, and it sounds like it happened for you, is there's all of these layers of things that you learn and realizations that you have. And it's not, I think it's easy to look at that and say, oh, look at where you're at now and say, oh, you had this master plan. You were going to sell a bunch of books. You're going to build this business. And really, I think it's almost like layers of an onion, that it's just like, all right, I'm start here. And then I do that. And then I realize, hold up, there's something else. And then there's something else. And then there's something. And you just start discovering all these things that can open up. But it like you said, it can start as a passion project, which I think can be really encouraging for people who feel like, hold up, I don't have this big business idea or this all figured out or whatever. I just kind of want to write a book. I don't know. Was that your experience and like kind of how things unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, whenever I'm asked about the book, everyone's like, what was your plan? What was your strategy? And I didn't have one. I mean, I just knew that I had a story in my heart that I wanted to share, and I just kind of let it unfold through there. And actually, writing a book, and especially self-publishing a book, is so similar to like bringing a child in, not gonna lie, but a loose comparison. Like, I know people always say like they're having a book baby.
Yes.
And I think that for me, every book I write, I do learn something about myself, as the parent of the book, the author of the book. I go through a new journey. And like you said, it's uncovering all these layers and peeling back that onion. You learn something about yourself, you learn something about the process, and you're able to adapt as a person and your process as a business owner as well. So definitely, I wish I had more strategy in the beginning. I think I'm a better person because I learned a lot of things the hard way, but looking back, I think I definitely would have done some things differently.
Yeah. What, speaking of looking back now, what are your thoughts on how, children's books change lives, and what's been some of the maybe most rewarding feedback that you've gotten from folks who have read the book?
Yeah, I mean, children's books, they really provide an opportunity to tell children or reinforce messages. It tells children what we think of them. It tells them what society thinks of them, and what we put in front of them lets them know what we want from them and what we value. So it's super important that what we put in books reflects positivity, reflects accurate messages, and really allows children to learn in a way that makes sense for who they are in this world. So I don't take the work that I do lightly. I see it as very important and very, very needed. Most rewarding anytime that children or families tell me that they're able to find themselves on the pages of my books. It's definitely something that warms my heart, because that's the intention. That's really what I wanted them to get out of it. I think just like rewarding, I'd say just having the ability to impact the way a child sees themselves, impact the way that other children see them, that just means the most to me. And that's definitely so rewarding, because I know that I am a part of changing the trajectory of their lives. I write books for Black children, but they're not only for Black children, they're for all children. It's important that all children see the positivity that lives inside of Black children, that they see Black children for who they are. And knowing that I'm a part of changing those narratives is super rewarding for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. One is representation, right? I mean, it's kind of what you talked about, is seeing themselves on the pages.
Yes.
Which if they're not reading books where they see themselves on the page, then how can they see themselves in that story?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Such a cool message. Why self-publishing? It seems like, just from sleuthing around on Amazon, it seems like you've got an imprint that you're publishing under, and kind of your own imprint, and so you're effectively self-publishing through an imprint. Why did you decide to go that route?
Well, I really wanted to own my stories. I had a book inside me that I wanted to get out right then. So it wasn't an option for me to wait to submit a manuscript or to try to find an agent or go through all the steps that traditionally publishing route requires. I also wasn't very familiar with that route. And I was able to easily find more accessible information about the self-publishing route. So that's the way I went. But it was mostly about timing. It was mostly about wanting to own the stories. And it felt like that now was that time. So self-publishing definitely was the route for me. And I wouldn't change anything about that.
Yeah, because knowing what you know now, this probably goes back to the like no master plan at the beginning kind of
Mhm.
thing. Knowing what you know now, like, are you glad that you did it? What pros, cons, kind of reflections?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, the books that we're talking about, I wrote them 4 years ago. And right now I've been talking about them more than I had even when I started. And I am, pretty confident that had I went the traditional route, I wouldn't be talking about these books still. It kind of would be over and done with. Definitely from the financial aspect. I mean, the possibilities are completely just endless. You can so much possibility in the trajectory of a self-published author, especially if you're able to continue to speak about your books and get that information out there. I wouldn't change that for anything. And I really enjoy the process. I enjoy being in control of the illustration process. When you traditionally publish, it's typically a separation between the author and the illustrator in that process. I like to be very hands-on with my illustration process. I like to work with my co-create with my illustrator, but have a lot of say in what that looks like and creating the characters and just ownership of that. And that's something that means so much to me, especially when you're talking about representation.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's switch gears a little bit to launching and marketing. So I want to talk maybe launch and then go into marketing, because you touched on something that I think will probably guide some of our discussion, which you said I'm talking more about these books now than I was even way back,
Mhm.
which I just love. And that goes to, like, we call it the 1 year launch, but really that for you it's been beyond that, and which is how you really sell books long term, right?
Yep.
But how did you launch your first book and your first couple of books? And what worked the best for selling copies?
So I had no launch plan. I had no marketing plan when I didn't even know that I needed that. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
I just knew I wanted to write a book and I knew I had to find customers. I didn't have a sense of I knew who my ideal customer was because it was very clear. My son, other children who looked like him, Black children, Black families. And the first thing I did was, where am I going to try to sell these books? So of course, I knew about Amazon and I got the books up there. And my only strategy when I first launched was to do vendor events. And I found all the vendor events where I felt that I could find Black children and Black families. I signed up for every single one. And that was pretty much that. And I would say social media, Instagram, Facebook were the only things that I had to put my book out there, but there was no strategy behind it. I was very shy about talking about my process. I didn't really share any of the behind the scenes stuff. So it was working behind the scenes. And it was like, here's my book. And, for those of us who have been doing this a while, we know how that's not the way that you should do that. There needs to be more
Yeah.
strategy behind that. And the more you can talk about your process and do a launch plan that you can back yourself into and sort of set that
Mm,
up, the more
yeah.
success you're going to have with that. So I
Mhm.
didn't have that. And I actually didn't figure that out until I would say more recently,
Mm,
because I just didn't know. And I think because one of my successes, I think, was directly correlated with knowing exactly who my ideal customer was. I was clear. I can't
mm,
say I was like super
yes.
intentional
Yeah.
about it, but because I was able to identify it, had a lot of success with that, but it
Yeah.
was more happenstance for me.
Mhm.
I think about halfway into it, I'm 4 years into it now, but I think about halfway, it was like, oh, strategy. Oh, marketing plan. Oh, this is a book business. All
Mm-hmm.
of that became more clear. And when I was able to get more clarity on that, I think I saw the increase in sales and was
Yeah,
able to actually sell the books that I really wanted to.
that's great. And I completely agree. I mean, the ideal reader and the focus on that, that's the one thing such that doing it makes everything else easier and unnecessary, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's obviously helped with a lot of what you've done since then. But I think something that's also encouraging to folks who are listening to this or watching this on the YouTube channel is that it's not all about your launch. I think sometimes we have this concept we talk about is like the Lamborghini launch versus the Toyota Camry launch. And
Yes.
it's like everyone thinks the Lamborghini, it's like, Lamborghinis use up a lot of fuel, they're fast, they're glamorous, whatever, but they're gone in a flash.
Yeah.
And this is your one launch week, but then the Toyota Camry just keeps going and going and going. And you've had Toyota Camry books,
Yeah.
and so I think for those folks who are either worried about the launch or you've already had the launch of your children's book and you're like, oh man, that didn't go as well as I thought. It's so tempting and so easy to just move on to the next project and say, oh, I guess that just isn't going to work.
Right.
But it's not all about the launch.
No.
So I guess for you, at what point did it start picking up steam and you're like, oh, this is really moving? And then how did you keep from kind of just moving on to the next thing and instead keep marketing the books that you have?
Yeah, I mean, again, I didn't have any idea what a launch was. Like that whole concept, I didn't know what that was. So I couldn't even say I had a Toyota launch. I had a bike launch, a borrow your mom's car launch. I didn't know that there needed to be strategy. I mean, I didn't know. And, I feel like I had a Lamborghini product. So it was, a solid product, but no launch. And I think for anybody, listening, it's like, sometimes you do have to just do it. You have to just get out there and do it. And it is okay to learn as you go. I did make a lot of costly mistakes, but I'm, a better person for it. But I think for me, I knew that my message needed to get out there. And it was actually my husband, who is, my business partner, who I was like, I got to get more books out. I did this one, move on to the next one and keep going. And he was like, why do you need to create more books? Like your books haven't reached every child in this world yet. They haven't touched, everyone that you need to see them. So he's like, we need to keep doing this every year. So we would start to make a list of all the events we wanted to do. And every year it was new people, it was new families, it was new children. I mean, I'll say until that book you feel like is in the hands of everybody who needs to read it, you can still keep going. There's no stop. And I know that my books have not gotten in the hands of everyone yet. So I will say for me, a pivotal moment was, of course, the Netflix feature. That really changed for me just how I needed to structure my business, how I needed to continue to market and get launch plans. It allowed me the opportunity to sort of reset and relaunch. And rethink about my marketing strategy. I mean, my books were chosen for Netflix because of why I put them out there and the need that Netflix was trying to accomplish, which was the teaching tolerance, social justice, standing around building identity. So because I think one of the things I did early on was, again, knowing that ideal customer, but also it was very clear why they were created. And I think over the years, they have continued to reach that exact person. I think if you create a book for someone, they will find it. They will find you. And the more clear you are about that, people will continue to find that. So for me, it was a moment where I was able to adjust and relaunch. And I continue to have conversations about these books in so many different ways. And again, I wanted as many children to see themselves in this book, and many Black children to see themselves in this book. And until every child has this book, I will continue to talk about this very series.
That's so awesome. That's great. I know I'm sending you a copy of my new book published, and chapter 21. I think you'll like that, and that would be hard. It talks about exactly what you're talking about, like the relaunch. So how do you bring how do you relaunch your book to create another spike and then go on the 1-year launch and keep selling books long term? So I want to circle back to the Netflix piece in just a bit. But before that, looking back, what's in your eyes, what's sold the most books? Like if you were to say, all right, these 2 or 3 things that I've done, I feel like have really moved the most books long term.
I'll say 2 things. One thing is definitely for me, niche vendor events. Vendor events exactly where who I'm looking for is going to be there. So initially I was signing up for all kind of events, wasting a lot of time and money because they weren't finding my exact customers. But once I was able to say, this is where my customers are, definitely I would sell out of books all the times, which now I kind of feel like that's not the best goal. I don't feel like selling out is a good accomplishment. I think it's a inventory management issue that looked at, my first event was like, yeah, I sold out of books, but it was like, but wait, now you're not making any more money because you don't have books. So
for sure.
I no longer see that as an accomplishment. I love to continue to have inventory, but definitely when I can go to events and I'm busy nonstop and I'm seeing the kids there, the families there, that's been successful for me. The other thing is Facebook groups, niche Facebook groups where you are either building rapport, building relationships, people who know you, like mom groups is for me, even niche down even further. Any of those type of books have been great because if I put out there that I have a book or I either need something as part of my launch, they quickly respond. So definitely those have been the biggest areas where I'm selling books.
Cool. That's awesome. And I feel like because those are 2 kind of outside of the box ideas that you don't normally hear. Do you think, well, I guess maybe the 2 of those are specific for children's books, but I'm sure they work either, no matter the genre. What can you explain, what do you mean by vendor events for people who don't know what that is and how does that work?
Yeah, so I'm in California, the Bay Area, and I'm sure this is pretty much everywhere, but we have local events. I mean, similar to like a farmer's market, but a community event where, they have vendors. So you're buying a booth. You always want to make sure that you're going to be able to make your money back. So looking at that amount, I mean, ours here can range anywhere from like $50 to $400, depending on the event. And we have some pretty good events that are centered around cultural events where I know for sure I'm going to have families there, and those are exactly who's buying my books. I never really see I'm usually only the only person there who's selling books. So I think that's a plus. I typically never do vendor events that are books focused. I find that it's too much competition and it's not really a good interest for me. So I like to be the only book vendor. And that's also a question I ask is like, who else is going to be there? Because I need to know, what's going to happen there. I actually will add a third for children's books. And I would say it's schools. Absolutely. Schools have been a complete, selling a lot of books through schools because they'll purchase wholesale, they have budgets, you establish that relationship, you're able to, they'll buy your books every year. And you're also, if you have other skill sets that you can combine, I'm a licensed therapist, so I'll go in and I'll do, teacher trainings or, curriculum design, all of that on top of that.
And can you get like 30-second, 60-second synopsis of like, if someone was like, hey, I've got a kid's book that I want to sell to schools, what's that process look like? Who are you going to? Are you bulk selling for every kid in the school? You said they have budget. Like, how does that kind of work?
So I would say the one thing for that is warm them up, don't just call up the school and say, hey, how can I get my books? You want to try to build a relationship. So I suggest trying to find the school administrator, either a principal or maybe a admin or even a teacher. You can find them on LinkedIn, or you can find them in teacher specific Facebook groups in your area, and try to just warm them up, like talk to them a little bit. That way, when you send that email, they're kind of expecting you. For me, I do work in the schools in terms of building relationship with them. I do decolonizing a curriculum in schools and have some established relationships. So I'm able to get my books in that way as well. And being a licensed therapist, that works there. But I oftentimes will reach out to schools across the US and internationally, and I'll just start to try to build a relationship, comment on their post, try to get to know them a little bit. And that way, when you talk to them, you can find out what their needs are.
That's great. That's great. So for teachers, you're saying find them on LinkedIn or in teachers' Facebook groups, build a relationship before you reach out.
Yes.
All that stuff. Do you ever send a book to them as kind of like as part of the, like, trying to get them on the phone or anything like that?
Yeah, what I do is I create like a nice little PDF pamphlet. I don't actually send any hard copies to them. For me, it's an issue of just, you send out the copies, you're not sure if it's going to come back. I think a PDF is completely appropriate. So I write a little letter, and I specialize the letter. I don't send the same letter. I'll change different things about it, and I'll show them the books, and I'll try to speak to what I think their goals are, because anytime you're contacting someone, you want to speak to what their needs are. It can't just be like, here's my book. It's like, what problem can I solve for them? What can I help them accomplish that they may need? And I'll talk a little bit about that and show them the books that I have, and may say, hey, like, are you trying to, talk about diversity in your school? If so, here's something that I have for you. Or sometimes I'll say, hey, are you interested in a book reading? I typically don't like to do free book readings, but sometimes I will. And I'll say, I'll do this book reading, but I like to send order forms home to every child at your school.
Yep. That's smart. And I've heard from a lot of other children's book authors that works well. So is it kind of you'll have them send the order forms home in advance, and then there's a due date where they need to be turned in by, and then people pre-purchase, and then you show up with those books, you're able to match that with the kids, and now you've got built-in sales.
Yep.
Got it. That makes sense. Awesome. And then circling back to the events thing, I think that's super smart. So it sounds like your keys there are there going to be, know your avatar. So is your avatar going to be there? So for you, that's families. Are there, and not doing not doing book events. You want to be the only, or one of maybe two only book options, and then minimizing or watching or minimizing the fee, especially comparative to expected sales. And you said 50 to 400, I think, being the range there. Anything else that you look at or have learned of, like, hey, here's how to make sure that it is actually going to be a successful event?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, if you have any historical information about how many attendees are there. So for me, it's like, is this a new event? Am I willing to set up and go out there? Because it's a long day and it's hard work. And it's a lot of like, you're front and center. They want to talk to you. So, I'll look at that, weather conditions too. If it looks like it's going to rain, it might be something that you may not want to go to. But I'm definitely looking at, like, is this an established event? Like, how successful am I going to be on this day? Because, I don't like to put myself in a position where I'm going to waste any resources, both my time or money.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm assuming that that's probably evolved over the years, where probably in the beginning it was, all right, cool, any opportunity, let's do it. And then as you kind of learned the process, like, all right, now I'm going to be way more selective with which ones I go to.
Yes. Or sometimes I'll ask, like, how many vendors do you have? How many are food? How many do you have? Do you have any books? Or is it apparel? Like, try to get as much set up as possible, so then and then, of course, also being able to be prepared for that event. I mean, if I can have an understanding of how many people they plan to be there, that tells me, how many books I'm going to need to bring in terms of my inventory.
Got it. And do you have I'm sure that's not exact. Are you doing 30% of expected attendees, or how do you kind of figure out how many books do you need to bring?
So I typically, if they tell me, I usually like 85% is going to actually show up. And then I will bank on about 50% of those I'm going to be able to get. Because again, for me, it's super niche. It's more than just families. For me, it's Black families. So I won't go to an event that, if I don't know if it's going to be centralized around Black people, Black family, I won't go, because I'm looking for those people who are going to just glance at my booth and come on over. Because again, it's hard work. I used to sign up for every single event, and it's time consuming.
Cool. That's so great. That's really, really helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
How have you gotten so much PR with this book? And maybe even specifically, we can start with a Netflix feature, and I'm assuming that's probably had a ripple effect.
Mhm.
But how did that come about? And then how have you gotten so much PR for the book?
Yeah, so with Netflix, they reached out to me directly, and it was because my book aligned. They wanted to do the Netflix original series bookmark, celebrating Black voices. And my book aligned with the standards they were using, which were teaching tolerance and the identity domain, because my books are all about building self-confidence and pride. So it was that moment where they identified that my book was created for this reason, and it was that perfect kind of synergy moment. And yeah, they reached out directly to me, and I have an author on the show, which I didn't even know until later on. So
You said you had a what? You had a what on the show?
I was the only self-published author
Oh,
featured on the
no
show.
way. No
And I didn't
way.
know
Yeah.
until like later on.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I was just because, self-published authors, we don't always get the respect that
Mm-hmm.
we deserve.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a pleasant surprise. And that has definitely been a ripple effect for me. So at that point, I made the choice that I was going to look at diversifying my marketing plan. And I brought on a PR, boutique PR firm to start to support with just getting my message out there, crafting my story, and continue to just get my books out there.
That's awesome. What was the ripple effect from the Netflix feature? Did you see an immediate spike in sales? Was it more so just publicity, and then that parlayed into a bunch of other publicity, or like what was kind of the after effect of that?
I think the biggest thing for that was one, it gave sort of like a social proof of kind of like this book, this brand, we back it, this, look at this. I mean, and Netflix is worldwide. So it put the book on a platform where everybody could see. And because I was talking about the story and the experience from that just became a ripple effect, things that I didn't even imagine. I think we kind of live in a society where it takes another person sometimes to validate what's going on. And I think for me that's what happened. It was like, oh well, Netflix backs this book, well we want to know about that story, we want to know about that. And it was book sales, it was more media, it was more just talking about just who I am and my story and all of that. And it has continued to come. I mean, now we're 1 year post Netflix, and we're still talking about
Mm,
this. And
yeah,
I just love it. I mean, it's
yeah,
definitely changed my life in so many ways.
that's awesome. Now, I was when I was browsing on Amazon today, I noticed something that I don't know that I ever seen before, which was I'm on your book listing and it says teacher's pick, and then
Mhm,
I click that, and then I go into this whole section of Amazon
mhm.
where it's like, oh, whatever, this age to this age or this grade, and like kind of all this stuff. So how did that happen? Did you have to submit for that? Did they reach out? Like how did you land that? And has that had any impact on book sales, the teacher's pick piece?
So again, that was one thing, same thing like you. I went on Amazon. I'm always Googling myself, which I suggest, for self-publish, always Google yourself, as much as possible, see what people are talking about your books and all of that. And it popped up and I was like, oh wow, it's a teacher's pick. Same experience that you had, went on there, saw what that meant. I guess Amazon has a process. I actually don't know how they even do that, but I'm certain that it came after the Netflix. So I think that again,
Mm,
once people were seeing the book, they saw why it was created. I think they probably have a committee that talks about which books need to be teachers' books, but
mm,
definitely, I think for sure came out of the Netflix, or just more people seeing the book, knowing why it was created, its intention behind it, and having it in classrooms.
mm. That's great. Man, what a fun and cool story.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing all that. What would be kind of, knowing what you know now, what would be your parting piece of advice for Thomishia from a few years ago, or all the other Thomishias out there that are thinking about writing a children's book?
Mhm. One, I would say just do it. I think a lot of us carry this book with us throughout our life, and we do a lot of talking about it. We're like, I want to do this. This is one of my goals. And then we don't know where to start. So we just never start. And we're just like, just carry that around. So definitely anybody who's just thinking about it, just do it. The other thing I would say is get some help doing it, get some support. I think that there are so many resources out there. And I just spent a lot of time Googling, I looked up stuff, and that there is a lot of information free out there on Google, and you can, on the internet, you can find it, but it's confusing, and self-publishing requires like so many micro decisions that are going to impact the next step. So it's important to have a plan and get support with that plan, and don't be afraid to ask for help. And don't be afraid to show the areas where you're not maybe doing as well as you want, or just showing your process. I
Yeah.
think a lot of early on, I didn't want to talk about like what I was doing, like I'm going to do this, and just went
Yeah.
straight on to doing it. And I think had I shared more of my journey early on, it definitely would have helped with the launch and the success. So definitely get some support. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made is there were lots. We could have a whole different conversation about mistakes that I made, but one of them is I didn't actually, my first books, I didn't imprint them with my own publishing company. I did it with Amazon. So my best-selling book has Amazon KDP as the publisher, and I wish that I had put, Hey Carter Books there, but I didn't know. I didn't know why that was. I didn't know what it was an option. I was just filling out the little categories that Amazon told me. And all of those matter. Like when you put your book on Amazon, everything you put in there, it matters. The keywords, it all matters. So get some support for sure.
Yeah. That's great. That is so helpful. Thank you for sharing that. And guys, if obviously at Self-Publishing School, we have children's book school. So if you guys are ever curious about, if you have a book idea that you're thinking about writing and you want our help, or you just want to chat with someone on the team, we've got an easy link at self-publishingschool.com/children. You can book a call with our team. We love this stuff, and we'd love to talk to you about your book and talk through goals and put a plan together. So that's self-publishingschool.com/children. You can go there, book a call with the team, and we can chat about your book and how we might be able to help. Well, awesome. Thomishia, this has been so amazing. Where can people go to buy your book, to find out more about what you're up to and to support what you're up to?
Absolutely. You can go to heycarterbooks.com. Everything is found there. Again, I just highly suggest for self-publishing authors, you get your own website, and you make sure that there's a direct connection and link to you directly as the author. So everything's on heycarterbooks.com, on all social media platforms, Hey Carter Books.
heycarterbooks.com. And we've got Brown Boy Joy. We've got My Brown Skin. We've got King for a Day. We've got coloring books. Are there any other books that I'm missing?
Yeah, I have my newest title, Santa Claus is Coming to the Town. The town is Oakland.
Nice.
Which has been, the center for so many social justice movements throughout history. So this is just a fun Christmas book featuring a melanated Santa, and I'm excited about this one.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hey guys, heycarterbooks.com. Check it out. Grab a copy. Such an important message for our society as a whole and for your kids. And so check it out. Grab a copy. Thomishia, thank you so much.
Thank you.